Hello students, welcome to MBA 360. As we told you, we'll be covering a lot of other B schools that are beyond the IIMs that you must be a part of your consideration set. And the reason we do that is, it is good if you get into one of the big IIMs, only the top half IIMs, mind you, because the bottom half are not as good as many other B schools out there in the market, right? So what we did was we started covering the DoMS, which is the Department of Management Studies in all the IITs. They've been performing very, very well. They've been delivering, and mind you, they're rooted in the IIT culture. So you actually have a lot of tech and analytical integration that happens there. So you'll have a lot of multidisciplinary learning when you actually join a DoMS at any of the IITs, right? So what we're going to discuss today is the DoMS at IIT Kanpur. The Department of Management Studies at IIT Kanpur traces its origins in 1970 when it started the interdisciplinary learning. But it formally launched its MBA program only in 1993, blending technology and management studies. The MBA curriculum emphasizes analytical, quantitative, and leadership skills rooted in IIT Kanpur's strong engineering and research environment, preparing students for very, very diverse business roles. With a very selective CAT-based intake and rigorous academic framework, DoMS is recognized among India's reputable public MBA programs, reflected in its student profile and also the student placement outcomes that it's been consistently delivering year on year. What I'll show you is data now of why you must make DoMS or at IIT Kanpur be a part of your consideration set. If you want me to cover any other B school, please do that and I'll be happy to do that. But before all those things, if you really want to support us, just subscribe to the channel. It's very important for us to know that you support us, you see us, you watch us, and you like the kind of content that we deliver. So subscribe to MBA 360 before I move any further. Now IIT DoMS Kanpur, right? What are we talking about here? Established in 1974, right? But mind you, if you look at the program itself, it was launched in 1990 or something, 93 or something that I mentioned earlier, or 2001, I forgot, right? And it's an INA, of course, institution of national importance, spread over 1,055 acres. Remember, this is the IIT campus. DoMS is just a part of IIT Kanpur campus. So it's a part of IIT. So it's not only Department of Management Studies, which has 1,055 acres. It's IIT Kanpur, which has got 1,055 acres. The total strength, the MBA program is 223, of which 90% are boys and 10% are girls. This is very disappointing. I would ideally want about at least 30% to be girls, because especially in MBA, you need to understand every person in the society for you to actually succeed in your career and life. Because if you don't understand a part of half of this population, how can you create products or market or sell or create any strategies for the entire world? So that is the problem that I have. So from that perspective, this diversity goes against the institution, right? About 70% are from outside the state and 30% from within the state, which is Uttar Pradesh. And about 3 students come from outside the country also. They have 31 faculty, which essentially means that you have 1 faculty for every 8 students, which is very, very good. Now coming to the placement, which is what you all want to understand. How is the placement at IIT Kanpur? DoMS, right? Now, whenever we talk of data, the first data that we pick up is from the Government of India data, because that's submitted on an affidavit to a regulator. So to that extent, the data is more authentic because someone has signed and sealed and taken responsibility for the data to be correct. Now, from that perspective, we've taken the data that is submitted to NIRF, which is National Institutional Ranking Framework, which comes under the Ministry of Education, Government of India. When we deal with that data, as I told you, it is slightly more authentic. Of course, there will be a lot of data which might be within this also, which might have a falsification of which is a problem. But having said that, of all the data that you have out there in the market, this is slightly more authentic as compared to any other data. So when we look at that data for 22-24, right, the batch of 24, 80 students was the actual intake that was permitted, but only 54 were admitted. So essentially if you look at it, 26 seats were left vacant. I actually have a very, very big problem with this with all the IITs. All the IITs seem to be guilty of this practice, that they don't fill in all the seats. And especially when it's a public institution funded by the government, all the taxpayers' money, I would expect every single seat to be taken up, because if you're so good enough, fill in your seats, because your faculty, your infra, everything is meant for 80 students, but you end up only admitting 54 students, which speaks very, very badly about you. So please, IITs, if you're listening to us, please, for God's sake, fill up all your seats. We as taxpayers are funding you, and you need to ensure that every single seat that you have is actually occupied, because it's otherwise a sunk cost where all of us are paying, but the student is not benefiting at the end of the day. And what do you do ultimately? You'll drive these 26 students to another private B school, which is not good enough, right? So what are you doing about it? Have some kind of a moral, obligation to ensure that when you're being funded, you fill in all your seats. That is my take on as far as all IIT is concerned. Kanpur is not an exception, because 32% of the seats were not filled in. Earlier, 51% seats also were not filled in, right? Now, of the 54 seats that were admitted, 49 graduated. So 5 students either dropped out dropped out or failed. 5 students, right? So that's what happened here. 49 graduated. Of the 49 which graduated, 44 students were placed, right? So IIT Kanpur obviously claims that about 90% placement, because from the 49 graduated, 44 were placed. From the number of students who are admitted, if you look at it, 81% is the placement percentage. From the student, the sanctioned intake, if you look at it, only 55%. But for a moment, I'll give the benefit of doubt for IIT Kanpur DoMS and say that 81% is the placement that you're dealing with, right? And 5 students, they claim, have moved for higher studies. This increasingly is becoming a balancing figure. Every student who is not placed, they show as if they moved for higher studies. Now, what is the higher studies after MBA? You go through an MBA because you actually want to get onto a job. And here, when I see in MBA also students moving for higher studies. Now, I'm not talking of ICERs and those kind of things, where we know that, people do masters and then want to do a PhD and then they want to do research, right? But in MBA, that is not the case. But increasingly, if you notice, every student who is not filled in, they show opted for higher studies, and that seems to be like 39 minus 37, 0. 73 minus, here there is no, because they could place all 73. So there is no one who moved for higher studies. But the moment you actually have this, they actually show moving for higher studies. So I actually question the kind of data submission that has happened from DoMS at IIT Kanpur. Now, what kind of salary can you expect when you want to join IIT Kanpur? Let us take you through that. This is essentially from the data that's submitted on the annual report of IIT Kanpur itself. When we look at that data in 2024 batch, this is 1 year, dated. The median salary was 19.9 lakh. So there's been a steady growth, 15 lakhs becoming 17.25, becoming 20 lakh rupees close to. Highest salary is 24 lakhs. The average salary is 18.2 lakh. Now, I have a problem here because typically what happens is your median salary and average salary is typically close to each other. In this particular case, the median salary is very, very high as compared to the average salary by about 10%. That is wrong, right? Now, if you look at this, from this perspective, the average salary is 20.5 lakh for the top 50%, which essentially means that the bottom 50% would be sitting on a 16 lakh kind of a salary, right? Which is also decent because there is not much gap between the average salary of the top half versus the bottom half. Because when you have this 18.2 lakh and 20.5 lakh, there is not much of a gap if you notice, just 10%. So to that extent, the other side also would only be 10%, which is what you can see. 18.2 minus 10% is about 16 lakh is what you will get ultimately, which is a very decent number if you will ask me, right? Because typically the range between top half and bottom half is about 20-25%, so the gap suddenly becomes about 35-40%. But in this particular case, this seems to be very, very good, right? But having said that, I do have a question mark on the kind of numbers that are being shown by IIT Kanpur DoMS. Of course, this is data that's submitted to the government, so I can't question that. But when a balancing figure becomes the students opting for higher studies, I do have a question in my head. There is a big red flag that raises in my head, right? But these are data that you have. What kind of companies come for placement? You have Axtria, Emphasis, Deloitte, consulting company, HDFC Bank, tech company, bank, Infosys, Cognizant, consulting or tech, Wells Fargo, JustPay, Overseas Casting Private Limited, Diageo, Engineers India, which is PSU, right? Everyday Nation, Bharat Electronics, which is again a PSU, right? MasterCard, Trade Dog Group, Tradens, Volvo, Eicher, Hyundai, EMA Partners, Reliance Nippon Life Insurance, Mahindra, Indus Valley Partners, Simprotel, Merck, Century Technology, Dell Technologies, Velocity. So you actually have all kinds of companies. You have software companies, you have tech companies, you have banks, you have investment banking companies, you have PSUs, a lot more PSUs. So you have quite a few companies. What I don't see here is the big tech companies like the Meta, the Google, the Microsoft and all are not here, which is surprising. Amazon also is not here when I see this thing. So that seems to be a question mark. I just do hope that the placement companies here start working on getting those companies also for placement, because those companies are missing here, but for a few Dell and those kind of things. And that for me is again a question mark that they should be working on as you move along. The idea that we are doing all these things is we want to tell you what exactly you can expect when you actually join DoMS at IIT Kanpur. If you want me to cover any B school of your choice which you want to know more about, please write to me in the message box here. I'll be happy to cover that. And please do subscribe to MBA 360 if you've not already done that. It is very important for us to know that you support us, you watch us, you learn from us, you actually take, and we are helping you take a more informed decision because of the kind of data that we present to you. Thank you so much. Namaste.